For me, there are three problems with humility, being humble. The first problem is, how do I pronounce it? Where I was born and raised, it was to be humble. But when I came to South Texas, they told me I had to be humble. But that's easily solved. When in Rome, do as the Romans do, right? So it's humble. The second problem is, what does it mean? Because there's this caricature of humility. Charles Dickens, Uriah Heep, this cringing, oh, I'm so humble, this type of an attitude, which I think has gotten into the English-speaking psyche. But the best way to learn what a word means is to go to the root. Where does it come from? It comes from the Latin word humus, which means earth, dirt, the ground. And a humble person is a person who has their feet on the ground, as we would say today, who doesn't live in some fantastic world of fantasy and daydreams, but lives in reality, knowing where they are, knowing where they're going, even though they may not be achieving it perfectly. They're rooted. They have an expectation of themselves which is grounded in their real person, and in the case of a Christian, in the person of God. Third problem with humility, being humble, is how to do it. And that's the gist of the little parable here. The Pharisee was your ideal parishioner. Really, he was. He went to church every week. He tithed. Wouldn't your pastor love it if everybody in the parish tithed? He fasted on the appropriate days. In fact, he fasted on some extra days. He was an ideal Catholic. Whereas the other man was a bit of a thief. I mean, really, he was a tax agent more than a tax collector. He was collecting the taxes for a person who had bought the privilege of collecting taxes from the Roman authorities. And that man hired this man to really go out to get the money. No computers or mail-ins and all that kind of stuff in those days. It was a hand-to-hand thing. And of course, he was getting more than he should have, and he was skimming the rest for himself. He was being a fraud. So this was a good man and a bad man as far as conduct was concerned. But the gist of the parable is, if you're humble, you know who you are. You're rooted in reality. And you know that being a good person or being a bad person, being righteous or unrighteous, is a gift of God to us. It's not something that we achieve on our own by doing all the good things or by avoiding the bad things. To be made right with God is God's doing. That's Christianity in a nutshell, isn't it? We could not get away from our weaknesses, our sinfulness, our selfishness, and so God did it for us. He became one of us in all things except sin. But then Paul says elsewhere, Jesus became sin for us, so as to raise us with him back to the Father and to reconcile us, to make us righteous. That's a word Catholics need to start using. Protestants have been using it for years, but we really have to make use of it, because that's a biblical gospel concept. We are made right with God because he loves us. So what do we do then? We respond accordingly. We respond by living a life of someone who has been made righteous. And we start being righteous among ourselves. We start treating each other the way we have been treated by God, despite our sinfulness, our selfishness, and our weakness. That's the how-to part. And of all people, we should be the experts in doing this, because in a few moments we are about to do what we should do all the time: give back to God what he has given to us. And the greatest gift he's given to us is the one who made us righteous, Jesus of Nazareth, Christ the Lord. And in the Eucharist, in the Mass, we offer God, Christ, back to his Father, and us, ourselves along with him, because we are completely connected with him now by our baptism. And so with Christ, we go back to the Father in an act of thanksgiving for the righteousness he has given us in Christ. That's the Christian story in a nutshell. That's it. And we should be the experts at doing it. And so we live accordingly. If I've been made righteous, I will treat you righteously. If you have been made righteous through Christ, then you treat me and all the rest of us righteously, whatever that means in any particular circumstance or situation. It's all very clear. And I think this reading is given to us at the end of our year of prayer, when we've reviewed the history of God's actions among us from Advent, last Advent on up to the crucifixion and the resurrection and the ascension, the sending of the Spirit. And we've listened all summer to the teachings of Jesus. And he's summing it up here. It's all being summed up in act according to who you are. People who have been made righteous by a God who makes you righteous for one only reason: because he loves us.